Akai just announced a new Drum Synth plugin for their entire MPC and Force product line, which is great news for people who don't like to go through endless sample folders to get the sound they're after. The question, as always, is how good they are and what the integration and overall experience is like, including pros and cons. Let's find out. Let's start with an overview. The MPC series, including Live 1, Live 2, and Force, can play either samples or sounds that are generated by plugins. Drum Synth is a new plugin in the series of plugins that are in these boxes. Drum Synth has 8 main categories of plugins: a kick, snare, clap, hi-hat, ride, crash, tom, and percussion engine. And within those engines, there are subcategories. So 80 is, of course, an 808. There's 90, 909, and then a few other models within each drum category. You can choose to load these either as individual plugins, in which case they take up the entire track, or as multis, where you get 8 different drum synths together in a group. As you may know, the MPCs can only support 8 separate plugins per project. If you use the multi plugin, then you still have 7 plugins left, so this only counts as 1 plugin, but you can't have 2 instances of a multi together in one project. And in parallel to the multi, you can also load up a individual drum synth, let's say, for example, the kick, and you'd want to do that if you wanted to play it chromatically or to process it separately. You can't combine drum synths together with samples in the same track. So if I go back into the multi, then you use these 8 pads and it's only up to 8, and then these pads are just empty. The beauty of drum synths as opposed to samples, like I mentioned earlier, is that you can shape your sound there and then, whether it's just tuning, which obviously synths tune much better than samples, and then a bunch of other sound design parameters, as you can hear here. Each of the different engines has different parameters here. Sometimes the individual models have different parameters as well. And then aside from the 8 parameters, you often have additional parameters here. For example, you can map velocity to any parameter you want. Let's say, let's go into here maybe, and map velocity to the tuning of this snare. So that's parameter number 1. So now the harder I press, the higher the tuning. And you'll hear this better if I hold note repeat. And sometimes you've got additional parameters if you use the synths individually. So for example, for the kick, you don't have control over the glide parameter when it's within a multi. But if we go to a track where I have it as a standalone synth, this track 2 here, then you can see there's a glide time parameter here. And if I increase, hold, and decay, then you can make these nice kick pitch bends. Obviously this is nicer with a little distortion, which brings me nicely to effects. Each drum synth has 4 separate effects, which you can activate, turn on or off, and then edit their parameters. And then if we go to a multi, to a drum synth kit, then you also have additional send effects over here and an overall mixer. So let's talk about the insert effects first. Let's turn them all on and take a listen to them. You've got a transient shaper. We won't go into that in depth, but yeah, you can shape the attack, as you can hear here. Overall shape and then sustain. Then distortion, you've got mix control for that. So it's sort of like a parallel send effect. And then on the second page, you've got an EQ and a compressor with nice frequency Q and gain controls. So those are the insert effects, which can change the sound dramatically. And then if we go back into the kit, let's take a listen to the send effects. To get to these, you need to tab all the way here, which is a bit cumbersome. Here we go, send effects and mixer. So the send effects are delay, diffuser, and reverb. We won't hear them unless we activate the sends in the mixer. So yeah, let's say go for this hi-hat and go full tilt. Then going back into the send effects, we can edit the effect parameters. So this is what you'd expect: feedback and delay time. And then there's a diffuser and a reverb with, a few reverb types and times. So those are the effects if you're in multi-mode, and then multi-mode also has a mixer alongside the effects sends. This is a nicely laid out horizontal mixer with pan and level controls. There are no level meters though, which is something they'll hopefully add in a firmware update. And you can only access it by scrolling left and right with these tabs. Again, currently in this firmware update, if you hit Shift and Pad Mix, that's just not available in multi-mode. Same goes, by the way, for pad mutes. Again, currently there is no pad mute functionality, which is a shame and would obviously be nice if they added in the future. Currently, if you want to mute individual drum synths, you'll need to spread them out across tracks, and that will cost you, so to speak, plug-in slots. So that's the environment within which the drum synths live. You've got presets for kits. So there are quite a few of those. And these are in multiple categories. So these are the categories. And yeah, I mean, we obviously won't go through these, but there's a lot to explore here. And these kits are obviously just starting points. So those are kit presets. If you load drum synths into an individual track, you'll also get specific drum synth presets, which is also nice to have again as starting points. And these two live in several categories, as you can see here. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a way to get drum presets into the kits, meaning individual drum presets loaded into the multis. Maybe I missed it, but yeah, as far as I saw, you could only load kit presets into the drum multis. In terms of automation, I think everything here is automatable. If I go to Shift Grid and then bring this up and double tap here, you can see all the parameters that I can add to the automation, and there are plenty of those to go around for each of the synths, each of the drum synths in a multi, of course. Yeah, so we can just maybe add one just to show, yeah, how about another one here? Let's say the tuning. So we can now go ahead and yeah, automate this just like any other parameter here. So with so many sounds, what do they actually sound like? You know, you've been hearing them throughout this video. I think they sound pretty good. If you want to try these out on your own, obviously there's so many parameters here. It doesn't make sense to go through all of them. You can download a free trial of the MPC software and try that out on your computer. Unfortunately, they haven't included the drum synths in the free MPC Beats software, at least not as of now. Let's just briefly taste some of these. So that was the kick. You can, by the way, choose any drum synth for any of the slots in a multi. So for example, I put a snare here. This pad doesn't have to be a kick, and we can put kicks all over the place if we want. Anyway, so that's the snare, and let's just take a listen to a few of those. And move on to the claps. Let's listen to a few of those models. And move on to hi-hats. Again, multiple models here. Move on to rides. Again, it's up to a matter of, you know, taste, but I think these sound pretty good and pretty varied as well. You know, all this obviously without any effects or shaping. Then there's a crash. So again, nice variance here. And toms. Let's listen to some of these. Yeah, excellent models, I think. Percussion. Cowbell, of course. Claves, congas, tambourines, shaker. Yeah, timpanis. I mean, it's I think really comprehensive drum synth engine. Tablas, FM synth, also always nice. Relatively limited controls compared to other FM synths we've been seeing recently. Still nice to have a bit of that high frequency metallic grit. Okay, so that's MPC's drum synth in a nutshell. Let's talk about pros and cons. On the pros side, I think think the drum synth implementation here is fantastic. There are plenty of shaping parameters, multiple models, easily accessible and meaningful effects. So above everything else in MPC, this update has now turned it into an industry-leading drum synth, which is pretty nice for a free update, so I couldn't think of any cons to having this as opposed to not, but having said that, I can complain a little bit, right? So as a drum synth, it's great, but holistically, since this update is part of a platform overall, this is where the integration, I think, can be improved. My main gripe is that you can't include the drum synths as part of an overall sample-based kit, so I don't mind the fact that you only have 8 at a time, but these empty slots are just begging to have at the very least samples in them. And then the second thing is, despite the fact that the automation is integrated well and the sequencing is integrated well, you still don't have a few basic features like I mentioned earlier, whether it's the pad mixer, the pad mutes, there are no chokes, no choke groups, at least as of now, and a little thing that I found a bit annoying is that copy doesn't work here as well, so you can't just copy pads. You literally need to copy the parameters manually from one pad to the other. And then as long as I'm complaining, I have a few smaller complaints. So as you press the different drum synths in a multi, that doesn't change on screen here. So say if this is pad number 1, if I want to change this back into a kick, I need to go into drum synth 1 and then, edit it like that. I would expect that to change immediately, just like it does on the sample-based instruments. So you always see and can edit whatever it is that you press. So that's my little wish list for Drum Synths 2.9.5, I guess. Having said all that, I think the drum synth fulfills the goal that it sets out to make, which is to help avoid endless scrolling through samples and to help you get the exact sound you want faster. Overall, it's a great addition to the MPC and Force product lines, and it's a free update, so that's always a great thing. Hopefully, over time, Akai will tighten up the integration and make it more seamless like everything else. That's it for now. If you're interested in further exploring sound design and other aspects of electronic music making, please check out my ever-expanding book, available to the good people who support this channel on Patreon. Hit like if this was useful, ring the bell after subscribing if you don't want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching.